Hi there, it's the Common Magician. I'd like to try something interesting with you. I've got a deck of cards. You can see that they're completely ordinary. They're in no particular order. But just to be sure, if you could shuffle the cards, give them a quick mix just like that, go ahead and do that. And I would let you go ahead and shuffle the cards until you're satisfied that they're mixed up. I want you to follow a very basic procedure with these cards. Now, right now, I don't know what order they're in. You shuffled them. I just want you to go through, find a spot. It can be any card at all that you want, somewhere out of the middle. Any card, I want you to look at the card, memorize what it is, place it on top, and then I want you to cut it back into the middle of the deck. That way you'd be losing the card that you picked. So what I would do is I would turn around, I would let you do that. Now, you're not here right now, so I will do it for you. Now, again, you shuffled the cards. I don't know what they are. I don't know what order they're in. I haven't seen any of them. So there's no way for me to know what you're doing here. But you would take a card out, any card that you want, take a look at it, memorize it, and then you would place it on top and then cut it into the deck, losing it completely so that nobody knows, except for you, what card you picked or where it's at. So just to recap, you shuffled the cards. I don't know what order they are. You selected a card out of the middle freely. You put it back into the deck, completely fair. Okay, I hope you would agree with that. Completely fair. In the grand scheme of card magic, this is about as fair can be. We're going to try something here. And in fact, if you're not satisfied with that, if you want to give them another mix, I just might let you do that. Okay? You could shuffle the cards. What I want to do, though, is I want to have you make another selection. I'm just going to riffle through the cards like this. Just dribble them down like that. I just want you to tell me when to stop as I'm dribbling. So very quickly, just go ahead. Tell me when to stop. Right there. Okay, now I just want to show you what's happened. Again, recap. You shuffled the cards. You selected a card randomly. You memorized it. You put it back in the deck. You've done everything, including making this selection right here. But somehow you have managed to magically locate your own card. Well, this is the Common Magician, and I've got a little bit of time on my hands, and that is an understatement. Anybody looking at the date that this is published in the future will make sense of that. We're going to look at one of the most powerful principles in card magic, and it's probably the very first principle that you learned when you first started learning about magic with playing cards. And doing card tricks. This is the, and as soon as I say this, some of you probably are going to turn this off, and you shouldn't do that because we're going to talk about this at a little bit of length here and discuss the various ways that this very basic principle can be applied to really even fool magicians under the right circumstances. This is the key card technique, one of the most powerful principles in card magic is the use of the key card. When you learned about this principle, you probably noticed, the bottom card of the deck, the Jack of Clubs in this case, right? And you have someone pick a card, any card, right? They take the card. And you say, go ahead, put it on top. They put it on top, and then you cut the deck, right, to lose it. And you know that the Jack of Clubs is sitting on top of it. That is probably how you first learned this trick. And then you say, and I'm going to find your card, right? You go through. Or, in this case, the original pattern, as I learned when I first learned about this, which I think I learned this from Michael Amar VHS tape. And Michael Amar was on there showing a bunch of kids' tricks. And this was one of the ones that he showed, was this key card principle. And it's the one where you're going to go down through the deck and you're going to turn these over. And as you go past their card, right, wherever that is. Let's see if I can find my key here. So the Jack of Clubs is my key. You keep going through and you say, I bet you the next card I turn over will be your card. And then what you do is you reach in there and you turn over, the one that's in there. It's a little bit of a gag. That's the way that I originally, saw this presented. It's probably very similar to what you saw. There are ways to present this principle such that it's not nearly as obvious, and in fact, in the view of a magician that might be watching, might really go over their heads. They might not recognize that the principle is in play. And we're going to talk about that. Before we get into that, though, I just want to talk briefly about the various aspects of a key card. There are three things that have to happen in the presentation of a key card trick, key card principled trick. The first is the acquisition and identification of the key. There are situations where you may have the key pre-selected and you know where it's at before the trick begins. Then there are other cases where the key card is identified on the fly. That's the first element. You have to first identify your key before you can use it. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to place the key. The key has to be placed in the midst of a selection or a card of interest adjacent to it or in proximity to it in order to use the key. So that's the second phase, right, of a key card effect. First, the acquisition and identification of a key. The second is the placement of the key. And then the third is the revelation, which is the part of the trick which is universal to all tricks, right, particularly a pick-a-card sort of trick. That is the revelation or the ending of the trick, where you then reveal what you know about the card of interest, the revelation of that card that is adjacent to the key. And those are the modular parts that are necessary in putting together a key card type effect. Very similar to what you would need to know in a lot of other kinds of effects as well. So we'll look at types, and we'll also look at uses in this tutorial, and we'll of course look at that trick that I demonstrated and discuss how that was done so cleanly without ever looking at the cards and being able to identify a key, with being able to have the spectator handle the cards and everything. Which brings up another point, is that there are ways in which you can use the key card principle in hands-off tricks, and these are the kinds of tricks that fool magicians the most. If you're trying to find something and formulate a routine or a trick, design a trick that can be fooling to people that otherwise are in the know in card magic, using a key card principle, it's best to use it in such a way where it's hands-off. That's one of the best applications of a key card. A lot of self-working hands-off card tricks rely on the key card principle. It's a very simple thing that is self-working, and it doesn't require any kinds of sleights and can be very, very powerful. So let's look at a few different options here as we look first at the different types of key cards and the applications. Okay, so the first type of key card that we're going to deal with is the standard one. That is just the known identification of a card that will be used as a key. In dealing with that, we need to talk about acquisition and identification of the card. That's the very first element in a key card effect. You have to first acquire your key and identify what it's going to be. So this can happen a couple of different ways. The first way is that it's known at the onset. That is to say, you already know that your key card is going to be, in this case, the ace of spades, and you know where it's at. And this is what is known before the trick begins. You walk up to somebody, or a trick is being presented in the moment, and you already know what it's going to be. You don't have to acquire it. And in that case, it's a very simple matter of getting the selected card adjacent to that somehow. And that deals with the second issue, which is the placement. And we'll get to that in a second. Acquisition of the key card may not necessarily be something that you know ahead of time. It might be something that you determine on the fly. You have to acquire that information through the course of the presentation. So that is to say that my trick starts with, hey, you shuffle the cards, right? And someone's going to shuffle the cards. And at this point, I don't have a key because the cards have been mixed up. So I need to somehow acquire it. Lots of ways that this can be done. One is by looking at the faces of the cards, right? So you can just very overtly look at the faces. You're looking at the cards and say you can see that you mix them up very well. And right away, I can acquire a key. I can either acquire my key down here, or I can acquire my key up here at the very top. Either one of these cards could be my key, and I just have to take note of one of those. I might even put a second layer in that, acquire the maybe the bottom card, right? And then what I do is I will then shuffle it all the way to the top before I begin, right? Just as long as I get my bottom card transferred to the top, or vice versa. I might look at this situation and say, you can see the cards are nice and mixed up, and I note my top card, the king of spades in this case, and then I thumb that off first and I shuffle it to the bottom. Now, the benefit of doing that is it can throw off the person that's in the know, someone that knows what key cards are. When you do an overhand shuffle, it's a very off-putting kind of motion. It's someone who, Uncle Uncle Bill, who, every good uncle needs to know a card trick. They're going to know the key card trick. Uncle Bill knows the key card principle. But when you go show Uncle Bill a trick and you shuffle immediately after looking at the faces, that's off-putting to Uncle Bill, because Uncle Bill doesn't know that step in a key card trick, right? He knows that you should know one card on either side of the deck, but when you shuffle, that seems to mix everything up. But really, all you're doing is you're displacing your key card to another location. So that's one way to acquire it, is just look at the cards, locate your card, and then move on from there, either by reorganizing it to a different place or just noting the card. In this case, let's say the top card, the 2 of clubs, and then going right into the trick. One way to acquire. Another way to acquire, and this is a really good one, that is to note an adjacent card in the moment. And it works on the misdirection that is natural in the presentation of the trick. And this can be done such as this, where you would say, tell me when to stop. And the spectator says stop. And you show them the card that they stopped on. In this case is the 3 of clubs. But as I'm showing it, this misdirection of demonstrating the card that they selected, I can also look at the next card, the next key, which is the Jack of clubs. And by doing this, I can say, look, I'll look away. And just by doing that, I'm looking at the key over here while I'm showing them that one. In Magician land, when you're dealing with people that are in the know, this can be done even more subtly. You can say, tell me when to stop, and they say stop, and right here I'm thumbing up the index here, and I'm very discreetly peeking the index of this card. And I say, this is your card, and I can say, I won't even look, but I've already acquired what it is. And to the magician, this looks very fair because I don't seem to be looking at anything, but I've already got my information, and then I can drop my key back on top and I'm ready to rock and roll. So acquisition of the key card in a known card, a known identity kind of situation. Those are several ways that it can be done. Other ways to acquire, you can use any one of any types of peaks. So peaks that are my favorite, one peak that is my favorite, you could have someone shuffle, and you can say, great, you have mixed up the cards so nobody knows what order the cards are going to be in. And then I can either turn over and discreetly grab the index, okay, or I could also necktie, that's when you raise the cards up, I could necktie the deck and I could buckle the top card and note the index of that card. This is sometimes referred to as a bubble peak or a buckle peak. Where I'm looking and I can see the index of the top card right there and I can note it. Another good gambling peak that I've talked about before is to apparently square the deck, but what you're actually doing is you're going to crimp and buckle the bottom card towards yourself. And what that does is it gives you that image down here where you can note the bottom card and get that in mind. You could even follow that up immediately with a overhand shuffle and just shuffle that card right to the top, and then you know the identity of your bottom card. Okay, so peeking, you can peek in to the cards and find out what the top or the bottom is to acquire your key. Now there are other types of keys, but before we get into that, let's talk about uses, and that is in placing the key, before we talk about other more exotic types of keys. Okay, so some of the generic ways to place. We've already talked about the very basic one, which I highly recommend you not necessarily do. Although I did it, we'll get to in a minute, I did it on my demonstration. But there was some things going on there that covered for the fact that we're using a key. There was some shuffling going on and fairly hands-off sort of procedure. But that would be that you have the spectator place it on top of the key and then cut it in. Okay, that's the one way that you can place your key. Another slightly more covert way is that you could do the Hindu shuffle sort of placement. That's when you know the key as being on the bottom of the deck. So this works best whenever you have someone shuffle and you say, and you can see that everything is very well mixed. Everything is in a different order. You shuffled the cards, right? We don't know where the cards are at. What I've done is I've moved the card that I peeped, the 3 of diamonds, from the top now to the bottom. And now I'm set to do the Hindu shuffle sort of placement. That is where you do a Hindu shuffle. You say, tell me when to stop. They say stop, and you say, here is the card that you selected. Now, I already know what my key is. It's down here because I shuffled it to the bottom. So the Hindu shuffle retains the bottom of the deck. So now I can demonstrate the card that is selected, and I can drop my key on top. That's a very good deceptive way. Now, a magician would know this procedure, and they would understand that key placement. But that's a really good passable way to set a key. Another way would be to have the spectator unwittingly do it. And there are 2 really good ways to have a spectator unwittingly set a key. Both of them rely on the key being on top. So we need to somehow note what the top card is, either by peeking, in this case it's the 8 of diamonds, by peeking or by spreading, or by shuffling it into place, but I know what my key is. Now, this is the first way to have the spectator do it. This is my favorite one. This is by far and away my favorite way to have a spectator place it. You could even do it yourself. Doing it yourself would look like this. You would say, I'm just going to deal down. I want you to tell me when to stop. And the spectator would say, stop at any moment. They might say, stop right here, and say, great, this is going to be your card, and you show it to them. And in this case, it is the 9 of clubs. And then what you do is you pick up the balance of the cards and you drop them on top. What this does is it places what was the top card, the 8 of diamonds, into the keyed position because it was dealt first from the top. Now, what this looks like when the spectator does it is the same kind of idea, right? The key card that you noted, let's say the 10 of clubs here, you turn the deck over to the spectator and you tell them, go ahead and deal off as many cards as you want. Just deal until you're satisfied. When it feels right to stop, just go ahead and stop right there. Then they might stop, let's say here, say, now take a look at the next card, and they look at it and note what it is, have them memorize it, and then you say, go ahead and take the balance of cards that you have there and place them back on top, and the key is now aligned with their card. So the spectator can unwittingly place the key card themselves. That is a very deceptive way to place a key card. This will fool magicians, especially if it is not understood what is going to happen. If it's not clear what is going to be happening next, that can pass really, really well. One way to offset that is by giving an ambiguous sort of instruction. So an ambiguous instruction might look like this. We'll note the 2 of diamonds is on top. Say, I want you to count any number of cards, but keep track of the number of cards that you're counting. Deal off as many as you want. Count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4. What we're doing here is the ambiguous instruction is to count the number of cards, right? And to a magician, this is a misdirection because what they're thinking about is a number. They're not thinking about an order, right? And then when you get to the moment where you're placing your key, this whole idea of reversal has been forgotten about. So that is one way that can be used in a misdirecting way. Now, it would be helpful if in your presentation you use that number in some way to reveal something at the end. It'd be good to kind of bring that aspect of the trick, the number of cards, back into play. But that is one good way. A second good way to have the spectator unwittingly set the key. Again, this one uses the top card as the key card. You know the 4 of clubs is the key card. The spectator has the deck. You can say, I want you to look through the cards, and I want you to just pick out a card. Once you find a card, I want you to just break at that spot, set the rest of the cards down. I want you to stare at that card. I want you to commit it to memory. Once you're certain that you have it, I want you to go ahead and cut the cards so that we lose it and that I can't see it. Now, what they've done is they've actually placed the key card right against their selection. Okay, so they've placed the key card themselves. And then you can tell them to take that and cut it into the rest of the cards. So we've hopelessly lost it. So this procedure is really the same thing as noting a key card, having the spectator select a card and placing it on top. It's really the same kind of principle that's going on there. So you can unwittingly have the spectator set the card in that way. You confuse what's going on. So two ways to unwittingly have the spectator set the key. Another thing about using key cards in this way is you can do cuts. You can have the spectator cut the deck as many times as you want, because a cut doesn't ever change the order. You might cut between the key card and their card, and that's okay, because as long as you can note that the key card is separated, either on the top or the bottom, you still know where their card is at. It's either going to be the opposite of what it is, right, in the case in which it's split. Or if it ends up being on top, but it's on top, you'll know that it's the next card. If that makes sense. So cutting the deck as many times as the spectator wants to is a good way to make them feel that they have control over mixing the deck. If you have guts, and I happen to have guts, one thing you can try if you've set a key card, let's say that our key card is the 4 of clubs again, and let's say you have the spectator unwittingly set it, so they're going to deal down until they're happy. Right? They just stop at a place where they're satisfied, and let's say they stop here, and they look at that card, 7 of clubs, and then they're going to unwittingly set the key card, 4 of clubs, against their card, 7 of clubs. You might say, go ahead and give them a quick overhand shuffle, mix them up. An overhand shuffle is a series of cuts. Now, if you tell them to quickly mix the cards in this way, and you demonstrate it one time, chances are they will not cut between the key card and the selection. And if we look through here and find, you'll see that it has been preserved. Okay, and I have guts, I do that. Now, if you find that the reveal is messed up, you want to have an out of some kind to deal with that, and I leave that to you to figure out what you want to do, but that is a risk that I'm willing to take when doing key card effects, is to have the spectator do an overhand shuffle. Now, I would only have them do an overhand shuffle. Any other kind of shuffle is a big risk to messing up your key card arrangement. The one thing you do want to do is, if you're going to pull that, if you're going to risk that overhand shuffle, make sure you square the cards and press them so that there's no natural break between the key and the card of interest. That way, when they do go to shuffle, they're likely to miss that point. You can also do this and have some control over it, make it very safe if you want to. And that works like this. So my key is the 6 of hearts. I've placed my card of interest on top of the 6, and I cut it into the deck. When I do my overhand shuffle, I can just make sure that I take small packets, and then when I get close to the middle, throw a big chunk, and then take small packets. And then what I can do is I've just reversed the packets around the center section, but I've still maintained my key. So that's another little trick. You can appear to shuffle the deck and still maintain your key. That's one way to take the layman who knows about key cards and just really offset their understanding of keys in the moment. So that is the acquisition and the typical placements of a card. A couple of ways that are not as obvious, using other kinds of procedures, Hindu shuffle, or having them unwittingly place it themselves. Next, we're going to look at some other types of keys, some other non-traditional types of keys, and then we'll talk briefly about revelations and reveals when using a key card, and then we'll look at that in this discussion. We'll look at that initial trick that I showed you. So let's talk about different kinds of keys. These are the types of key cards that are not known by an identification in the traditional sense, such that you know the identity by the name of the card as to what your key is going to be. There are other ways to know the identity of the key card without having to relate it to its name. And the benefit of doing that is that you don't have to look at the faces when you're using these types of keys. So, for example, I might have a card that is altered in some way. Maybe it is marked. So my key could be a card that has one unique identifying mark on it, such that when I look at all of the cards in sequence, I can quickly pick it out. So you might just have a marked card. And I don't do this, but you might think about doing it. You take one card that you're going to always use as your, in every deck that you carry around with you. Just put a mark on it. In this case, I'm looking at, these are the these kind of classic sorts of classic-y looking bicycle prints that the U.S. playing card companies put out. This has kind of a doily-looking, little figure, this heart shape with a bicycle in the middle, and there's these little shell kind of flowery-looking things up here. I might take the corner. I like to spread left to right, so I might take one of these and color in one of the parts of it with a red Sharpie, a red marker. There's a red back. That way, when I spread, I can see it instantly, but it isn't apparent to the spectator. Okay, I would do that in the opposite corner. I'd do it in all the corners to make it fully symmetrical. But that is one type of key card that you might use. It is a marked card. And the freedom that gives you is that you can easily find the card. You can easily control it. You just have to cut it to the top. You don't even have to do any kind of special control in the moment. This could be after the spectator shuffles the deck, and you take it back, and you can just say, all of the cards are indeed different, right? And you can spread them out and say they all look like they're completely mixed up, and at that moment you can cut it to the top. You might even follow up with a top stock retention or something where you appear to shuffle, but you just held a break with an in-jog and then shuffle it back to the top. You know what? I think I might do a tutorial coming up soon dealing just with the top stock retention overhand shuffle, because there's actually a million things you can do with that. That's kind of one of those moves, one of those principles. This is a principle, the key card thing, which requires no skill. This is the top stock retention shuffle. This is a total sidetrack discussion. That's a move that requires fairly minimal skill that can do a lot of things. You can do a million things with it. So now that I'm thinking about it, I might follow that up. Thumbs up and comments, yes, if you'd like to see a tutorial on that. Anyway, you could retain a marked card in the place where you want it very easily with very basic controls, and then be ready to use it. So that is one uniquely different kind of key card that does not require you to have to know the identity of the card. And another one is a crimp. A crimped card could be a key card. In fact, a crimped card is always a key card. Anytime you're using a crimp, you're always using a key card. It's just that the type of key is one that is a physical gaff. It's a gaff that's either made on the fly or it's been prepared ahead of time. So a crimp in general is just whenever you take a card and you bend it in some way, right? So you could take a card while you're doing some patter. You could crimp a corner. And what I've done here as I'm holding the deck is I took my pinky and I just pushed up on the bottom corner inside of my biddle grip here. And the spectator doesn't see that, but I put a pretty good bend in that card, right? There's a million ways to crimp a card. There's no right, wrong way, good or imperfect or whatever. Just stick a bend in the thing when they're not looking at a moment that's opportunity. There's opportunity arises to do it. And then what you can do is you can have any card placed against that, and then without looking at it, I now know based on my crimp where that card is at. You can even really shuffle. If I know it's in the middle, I could shuffle small packets like I discussed, and then just throw big and then shuffle small, and I still have retained my crimp in that moment. So that is one way to use a crimp as a key. Another type of key card could be a short or a corner short. So a short is when you take a card and you trim off a little bit from the bottom, and if you want to make it symmetrical, you can trim a little from one side and a little bit from the other, and it makes the card short, either lengthwise or widthwise. What that does is it allows you to dribble the cards, or you can corner short them. That is, you cut the corner short on opposite corners. So you would do this corner and that corner if you dribble in that way. It allows you to make a card that kind of clicks at a moment when you're dribbling, and it will drop and make a very clean break that you can feel. If you do it from top to bottom, you can dribble them like this, and you'll feel it that way. Or you can do it like this, and it will stop. So a short. Or, this is my favorite kind of gaffed key, is not a short card, but actually a double card. What I did is I took a joker, one of my 2 jokers, the color joker, and then I took one of the advertising cards, which in this deck has a back design on it, and I rubber cemented or contact cemented that card to it, and I made a double thick card. So this card is actually double the thickness of a regular card, and this does a very similar kind of thing where I can lay it in there in the middle, and I can dribble, and it will click at this moment and stop at that card. And I can use this to control various things, but I can also use it as a key. We'll talk about that in a moment. But a double thick card, and the nice thing about a double thick card is that it's somewhat examinable. You can have it in the deck. You can have someone shuffle the cards and they won't notice it. You can have them relatively quickly look at the cards, and there's no reason why they would notice it unless they really examine nice and close. If you had them do a procedure in the hands with the cards, there's no reason why they would notice that double thick card, because it's not that different from the rest, but it does spring differently, and it allows you to always be able to reliably stop at a particular place. You can use a double thick card like you would a short card, to force as well. But that can serve as a key. It can serve as a key that can be lost in the deck and quickly found again at any moment, which gets us to the presentation that I showed you at the beginning, which we'll talk about now, and that is using a double thick card as a key. Okay, so this is the explanation for the very first demonstration that I did. And I've given away the fundamental aspect of it, in that the key card we're using is a double card, and that is a joker in this case. If you decide you like this little gaff and you want to carry it in your deck, you might find another card that you will just know in your decks is a double and make a double out of it. Like the 5 of hearts. It doesn't really matter what it is. You just make a double, and then you can always know that that is your key. And you can also use that as your force card all the time, so that you're always able to force to it. So here's the procedure for this effect. What I did is I started with my double card in the middle. So it's placed in the center. And I start by saying I have a deck of cards here. The cards are in no particular order, and I show all the faces, right? And then I say, can you shuffle like this? And what I do is I give it a shuffle such that I still maintain my key card in the center, right? I just did an overhand shuffle, and by doing that, I'm just kind of reversing the deck by small packets, which retains it in the middle. And when I say, can you shuffle like this, what I'm doing is I'm telling the spectator, I want you to shuffle like this, right? And if they say yes, I say, great, give it a quick mix. Give it a quick mix. And what that does is it means that the spectator should essentially do the same thing, and they should do it sloppily and quickly. And that's good, because I want to keep that card relatively central, because I need to get to it here in a moment. And then I say, great. I take the cards back without looking at the faces. I say, because I want you to do something here in a moment. Now, you shuffled the cards. I don't know what order they're in. I want you, in a moment here, to just take any card out of the center. Now, what I did is I just quickly riffled or dribbled to my card, so I can feel that click. And I found my key right there. And I push it out as I'm demonstrating what I want them to do. I say, take out any card in the deck. This is actually my key card. I'm not going to look at it, but I'm going to say, I want you to take it out. I want you to look at it. I want you to place it on top, and then I want you to cut it back into the deck. Could you do that for me? And then what I do is I reverse my cut and I put it back on. What I've done is I've allowed them to shuffle the deck, and then I demonstrated using my key card what I want them to do, and I've set my key on top. So now they take the cards and they turn around, and I turn around, and they can then do this for real, where they take out any card that they want, they look at it, I say place it on top, and then cut it into the deck, and then turn back. So now they've picked a card, they've memorized it, and they've placed it right next to my key, which is my double card. Okay? So now I take the cards back and I say, let's recap. You shuffled the deck. I did not look at the cards. I had you pick any card you wanted, any card out of the deck that you shuffled from the middle. I had you put it back into the middle of the deck. I never looked at the cards. I don't know what order they're in. I don't know what you thought of. This is totally fair, right? And that is true. It is totally fair, except for the fact that I have this gaffed card in there that identifies where their card is at. I take the cards, I say, now look, what I want you to do, and actually, you can shuffle the cards if you want. This is the risk. Using a double card does create a bit of a natural separation. So I might say, instead of having them shuffle it, I could risk it, right? Like I said, you can do that with a key card. I could risk it. I might just say, look, we can even shuffle them again. And what I did is I shuffled small, I threw a big chunk, and then I shuffled small again. And I could say, and we really have no idea what order the cards are in, right? But I'm still in the same place where the card is relatively central, and then there is their card. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a dribble force using my double-backed card. Okay, I'm going to say I'm going to dribble the cards, and I want you to just tell me when you want me to stop. Dribble force usually works by having a break that is preset and then dribbling to the break and stopping. So the idea there is that they could say stop at any moment. They could say stop immediately, and I just go until that moment, right? Because it happens so fast, it looks authentic. They could say stop very late. If they're not saying stop, if I'm dribbling and they're not saying stop, I just drop all of that. I say, let's try that again. Just try to be a little bit quicker, right? I'm going to go quick. I want you to, and then you force them into that place where they are calling stop, and you're just stopping at that point. Okay, you just go on quickly until you hit that spot. It always, the phenomenon of it always seems right that they called stop. Quick nuance in that, you can also just be high pressured, right? Say, I want you very quickly to tell me when to stop. Okay, so quickly tell me to say stop. You're essentially gearing them up, right? You're amping them up and essentially just saying say stop, and they say stop. Now it's just a matter of drawing this out. You say, now look, just recap again. You shuffled the deck. You mixed them up. I did not look at the cards. I have no idea what order they were in. You set the order. You picked a card, any card that you wanted to. You looked at it, you memorized. You could have changed your mind if you wanted to. You put that back into the deck, right? We even shuffled it again. There's no way I could know what it was. This was absolutely fair. You then picked this spot. You told me when to stop freely. And wouldn't it be amazing if you found your card and then you can reveal it? Okay, so draw that out in the reveal. But that's pretty much it. It's just a key card trick using a very simple gaff that you can make with some rubber cement and a spare card. So again, if you have a deck of cards and you've got the one of these advertising cards that has a back on it, just make a double card out of a joker, and you'll always have it. And you can still use it just as a regular joker if you want to use it for joker card tricks. You can use that double card. It doesn't, there's nothing really unusual about it other than the fact that it springs a little bit different and it's identifiable. Another way to use a double card is just by the feel. This one right here. Right? You can just feel for it. It has a very different feeling than the other cards. You can really milk it out and just use it by feel. Double card, really, really great type of key card to use in effects. You can use it again as a force as well. So bonus, let's take a look at one other use of a key card that is not a pick a card, find a card. It can be used in a lot of different ways, but it essentially is the same thing as a key card. It's a certain type of gaff. So this can be the rough smooth principle, or it could be a double stick tape kind of gimmick. So you can see maybe even in the light, you got to be careful about this, that the light will shine a little bit differently. This is just some double stick tape. The Scotch double stick tape. You take a little square of it and put it on the center of the card. And this is a very good key card to use to make something disappear. If I wanted to do a card to a possible location, I might force the selection and have a duplicate sitting somewhere else. And I would take their forced selection. I don't know how I would force it. I could do a, actually probably the best force would be like an under spread call force. So let's say I wanted to force the ace of clubs and I had a duplicate somewhere. I would know that that's the fourth in the spread. I could get my card called out and then have them touch the back of any card that they want, like this one right here. And then I can square up and I actually move my force in underneath it, right? I could show that to them, right? And then I can somehow get this placed. I could say, go ahead and take a look at that. I want you to memorize it, maybe show that around, get it out of there. And then I can lose it back into the deck. And what I've done is I put it on top of my key card, which is actually the sticky card. And then if I just give it a little bit of pressure in the center, what I've done is I've made it such that the card is hopelessly lost. It's actually been, adheres to the card, the key card that it's sitting next to. It's lost in the deck. So then I can have it presented somewhere else. I can systematically show that their card has vanished. It's not there anymore. And then it shows up somewhere else. So a sticky card as a key card is another kind of use of a key card that's a little bit unorthodox, but very, very good use of a key to deal with a spectator's chosen card. The nice thing about this type of gaff is that double stick tape will not ruin your cards. You can actually very carefully, you don't want to crimp the card, but you can take it off and it won't hurt the finish at all, the plastic coating on most cards. The one thing I will say about using double stick tape is you usually want to put the square on, and then what I do is I take it and I rub it on my clothing or some kind of fabric, and I try to get that shimmer kind of dulled down. And I take some of the stickiness away too. You don't want it to stick really good, okay? You just want it to stick well enough that the card won't come off when you deal it or fan them out, that it will stick cleanly to the card underneath. But yeah, sticky card is a key card. That's a great use of a key card principle in a magic trick that is slightly different than a pick a card, find a card kind of situation. So yeah, you can also use key cards to keep track of a slug too. So you might have a number of different selected cards, have them put in there next to the key, and then you can always find your way back to those selected cards after some cuts or controlled shuffles. So anyway, that is the key card principle in a nutshell and a couple of different ways to use it. Quick discussion about revelations. So the last category is the reveals. This is a quick discussion. The neat thing about a key card is that it's just used to find the identity of a free selection. Once you know the identity of the free selection, any revelation will do. The revelation is the trick. The revelation is always the trick. The method is never the trick. The revelation is the trick. So once I know the identity of the card, I can go from there and reveal it any way I want. I can turn this into a mentalism trick where I just say, look, I just want you, I'm not even going to use the card. I just want you to think about what it is. And I'm going to say some things. And I want you to, I don't even want you to respond. Black, red, black, red, black, red. You're thinking of a black card, right? Yes, spades, clubs, spades, clubs, spades, clubs. It's a no, it's a club, right? You can do this whole shtick. That is the trick. That's the effect. It's the revelation that's the effect. So any revelation will do with a key card effect. And I encourage you to spend much more time on determining what your revelation is going to be than spending your time on how you're going to set your key. That's the simple thing. Setting the key is the simple thing. You don't need a lot of effort to think about that. Put your effort into the revelation. Spend your time on how you're going to reveal that selection and that information that you determine from the key. And really, you can use key cards for a whole routine as long as you've got a bunch of different... If you know 5 revelations and one way to set a key, you've got 5 different tricks. And that's the truth of it. So anyway, key card in a nutshell. Good luck with that, and I wish you happy magicking.